Good morning from Right Side Broadcasting Network live in Auburn, Alabama, of course, the friendliest village on the plains. I'm Robert McNeely, and you see that live shot there of the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is just beautiful this time of year, as is Auburn, Alabama. Beautiful weather, sunshine, Emerald Isle greens as we celebrate Irish American Heritage Month, thanks to President Donald Trump and his memorandums, commutations, executive orders. Over 400 executive actions since he's taken office, including the releasing of the FBI files with Crossfire Hurricane just this week, as well as streamlining the Department of Treasury. Speaking of your Treasury, thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, Colonial Metals Group. You need to scan this QR code now. Do not delay. Do it today. Shield your savings right now with that QR code, or go to freegoldguide.com/RSBN. We'll give you all of that no obligation information led by Paul Stone, the great CEO of this organization. They are the best in the business, whether it's retirement or sending a student to Auburn University or another great school throughout our wonderful land. Whatever it might be, for those huge things in life, you need gold and silver to back up your portfolio. It is truly the best bet and hedge against inflation. So freegoldguide.com/RSBN. This 2025 gold guide will show you how gold has increased in value 840% since Y2K, the year 2000. And over 7,000% since 1971. That's when we went off of the gold standard during the Nixon administration. So check that out today. Colonial Metals Group, freegoldguide.com/RSBN. We will be featuring today a congressional hearing on really the bias that exists with the INL and why targeting of conservatives continues to happen. We've seen the judicial lawfare take place. Even to this day, everything going on with the ridiculous Atlantic story. It was actually funny. Our producer found today that Atlantic was praising Signal years ago during the Obama and Biden administrations for that end-to-end encryption and the safety that it has within its app. But then, of course, they take a situation, a small mistake, and try to blow it up and throw spaghetti at the wall. That's what the far left does on a regular basis. Of course, our wonderful White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt taking care of that yesterday. And with all of the issues, I'd like to echo her comments to the press. With all the different issues taking place, why would you ask the same question over and over and over again? Either there's a clear agenda or there's just, some ignorance that perhaps is in the room. But we know now that with President Trump in office, we don't have an auto pen. We actually have a real president who is using tariffs. In fact, very excited for next week's reciprocal tariffs to go into effect on Wednesday, April 2nd. We'll be watching that extremely closely here as negotiations continue to take place with countries like Mexico and Canada, and of course China as well, as we look at fair trade, and especially with the European Union, which has taken so much advantage of the United States over the years, and institutions like NATO as well. We want them to pay their fair share. They once did under the first Trump administration, and we look forward to getting rid of that continued government bloat with people like Elon Musk, who is doing an extraordinary job with Doge. And of course, you saw last week, President Trump starting that process to end the Department of Education with the executive orders. And I think such a great moment in the East Room with students surrounding him for the future of America. They all got to sign their own executive orders. And I wonder if those are keepsakes as well. Maybe we can find one of those students to talk to and can show us their wonderful, beautiful executive orders from the East Room. We'd like to thank our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Of course, Lean, a great opportunity to shed some of those pounds before the summer beach season. Take lean.com, trim the fat like Doge trims waist. And you could do that with code RSBN, 20% off your deal there. And there are times when that yo-yo dieting happens. It can happen throughout the year. It can happen, during the holidays, post-holiday celebrations, those dry Januaries, and sometimes it goes back and forth, but it can be very unhealthy and it's dangerous. Studies show that you can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes as well, and other health problems. So breaking free from the yo-yo dieting, that pattern is the main reason why Lean wants to help you today. Freedom from that extra weight starts right now. So take lean.com, RSBN code for 20% off. The science behind Lean is actually extremely impressive. It's studied natural ingredients for weight loss, but also maintains that healthy blood sugar, which is crucial to all of this, and then controls appetite and cravings. It also helps burn fat by converting that into energy. So let me get you started with the 20% off today. Code RSBN. Go to takelean.com. It will be a fantastic option. This is a supplement, so it's also not an injection like some other prescriptions out there that truly are dangerous for you in the long run. This is an easy supplement to add to your diet. So takelean.com, RSBN code 20% off your first order. And I might have to order some today because this morning, Mr. Producer and Mr. Director surprising me with Whataburger. And I didn't even know that they had such a great breakfast. I mean, Chick-fil-A is fantastic as well, but it's the honey butter biscuit at Whataburger. Wow. I mean, that's a slam dunk. Jordan for 3, if you will. So I am happy this morning, as I hope you are, on this beautiful Thursday, March 27th. And how can it be that we're getting close to April now? Usually you look at a president and you measure the administration by 100 days in. We've been watching 1 week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, up to now 60 plus days of extraordinary accomplishments. Whether it's signing the Laken-Riley Act into law, whether it's removing criminal terrorists, and that's what they are now because of President Trump signing them into foreign terrorist organizations, whether it be MS-13, Tren de Aragua, or even those border cartels that have been operating in places like Canada. They had free reign throughout North America under sleepy Joe Biden. Oh, and that's another poll we should take right now. Remember when President Trump would ask, should it be sleepy Joe Biden? Should it be crooked Joe Biden? And then he'd take that voice vote at those rallies. If you're watching right now, type in to your different social media accounts, whether it be Rumble or YouTube or wherever you're watching. What do you prefer, sleepy or crooked when it comes to the former president? But never fear, Donald Trump is here, and he has really taken the reins with Tom Homan, celebrating his great successes. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, going on these ICE raids. In fact, she was down in El Salvador thanking the president down there for taking these criminals out of our country and detaining them. And she said, quite frankly, if you come in and break our laws, this is a possibility that awaits you, an El Salvadorian prison. So don't do it. And it's pretty much black and white. It's breaking our laws, and we will not tolerate that anymore at the federal level. So we've seen this really in a robust way with this administration over the course of 60 plus days, and the proof is in the pudding. If you look at thousands and thousands of people would come pouring over that border over the course of the Biden tenure or the auto pen presidency. Whereas now you're seeing that border almost fully intact and secure. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the border, Marines at the border. We've seen an increase in recruitment for our military since President Trump has come into office. And of course, yesterday, if you caught any of our coverage, Vice President J.D. Vance, a Marine veteran himself, the first to hold the office of the vice presidency, addressing Marines at Quantico in Virginia before his trip. And that was quite a nice jacket. My wonderful colleague Matthew Alvarez and I were commenting on how sharp that jacket looks, and perhaps that might become available maybe somewhere out in the conservative and populist companies with a number of those amazing bomber jackets, and of course that fleece that he had with the insignia of the vice president, and also his call sign as well. So that was very fun to see the vice president enjoying his brotherhood, the Marines. Hoorah! There we go. They're at Quantico. So an exciting time as we await this congressional hearing on really the bias that exists with people targeting conservatives. And we've seen this really over the course of the last few years, and I think about it every day. The fact that we are able to give you this unbridled access now, really fulfill our founders' vision of freedom of speech in this country, whereas 4 years ago, that was under attack. It was before Elon Musk owned X. It was when President Trump was banned from Facebook and Twitter. Think about those days. Even before the Great Truth Social, we were our backs against the ropes, and I mean the American people, who might have a right of center thought somewhere in this great land. But now it's a different day, and thank God for that. And thank God for our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, who bring you some of the best memorabilia out there when it comes to President Trump and this entire movement. I, in fact, have one myself. It's the Trump Force One replica plane. At patriotaddictdeals.com, claim your 20% off today using code RSBN20. That's code RSBN20, Trump Force One airplane. And this is great decor for your MAGA office or the MAGA man cave. And of course, for the ladies out there, also great decor for any room really in the house. So make sure it's on full display, and then your friends can ask about, hey, what's it like to be part of the MAGA movement? A great way to evangelize populism here in this wonderful country. So get your limited edition Trump Force One airplane for 20% off. patriotaddictdeals.com. It will go very soon. And trust me, the time I got mine, there were only 200 available, and then they were off the shelves really quick. So you want to purchase this today, a limited time edition of this great Trump Force One replica airplane, patriotaddictdeals.com. And we are looking at 1041 on the East Coast, the White House, a live shot there of the beautiful museum, residence, and of course a workplace where President Trump really gets a lot of things done. And one of my favorite things that he's done in this term, which he might not have done on the first term, if you remember a few short years ago, because he said, we have so much work to get done, I don't have time to redesign the Oval Office. And of course, it looks so lovely in his first term, but I think he took the Reagan rug, and I want to say that they were George W. Bush's couches and the drapes from the Clinton administration, because he said there's got to be something in the basement. And of course, there was storage, and they all seemed to match. I think he's replicated that. I'm not sure exactly on the furniture that's there. The Reagan rug, of course, is back in the Oval Office. But if you've seen the videos of the ornate gold, the FIFA World Cup is sitting there as we prepare for that competition next year to be hosted in Atlanta, Georgia, among other cities hosting the world. So that will be an exciting competition. And he has that gold, beautiful trophy in the Oval Office. I think 20 or so portraits of former presidents, including Ronald Reagan, adorning the Oval Office, and the Declaration of Independence is in the Oval Office. They have to put really a tarp over it, or just a stage curtain, if you will, because it can't be exposed to prolonged periods of light, whether that be artificial or natural. So he'll open that up on occasion. But how cool is that to have a president in office truly believing in our founding documents, constitutional federalism, republicanism, not the party, but the form of government. We have a president who truly believes in those separation of powers. And I think it's been on the best display over the course of the last week with the removal of the Department of Education and beginning that process. And then, of course, meeting with his extraordinary ambassadors who have yet to be confirmed. So please, the United States Senate, get to work on that. Appoint and confirm these extraordinary individuals who are taking so much time out of their busy lives, their careers, to serve the country. And they are true experts, especially someone like David Perdue of Georgia, the former senator for China. He will be really a great ambassador to take on the Chinese Communist Party. He did business in China. He understands the structure of what Xi Jinping and his regime want to accomplish. And they have been really put on the back burner ever since President Trump got back into office, because, of course, they were really running the Panama Canal. And President Trump sent Secretary of State Marco Rubio down there early on in the first couple of weeks of the administration to say that this won't continue like this. We're not going to have the Chinese Communist Party controlling trade throughout that Panama Canal, something we built and basically gave it back to Panama for $1 on the head. It was wrong to do back when Jimmy Carter was president. And I think President Trump will see it through, that we will be watching and operating those lanes once again, and rightfully so, because it's about free and fair trade. It's about the American economy put first over this globalist agenda, and it's about national security. And we've seen that with the strikes on the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They were controlling the Suez Canal and really blocking Egyptian, American, European trade really throughout the Middle East and throughout Southern Europe. No more. It's not going to happen under a leader like President Trump, because he takes action. And if you need to take action, whether it be dry hands or just your overall beauty sense, how about Angel Paste, the miracle cream? Experience the miracle today. Angelpaste.com. So the miracle cream itself, vitamin Bs really adorn this beautiful bottle. Also non-GMO, no chemicals. It is all natural, so it's good to put on your skin, unlike other options in the market that might be bad for you to absorb. So angelpaste.com, experience that miracle. How about the orange option with the immune booster? It's vitamin C's that you're putting into your skin, and it'll make you feel better, especially this time of year as the seasons change. You might have that tickly sore throat or even a flu of some sort, so this can help with that as well. They also have mosquito repellent, and they know about this because they're in Spring, Texas, the Lone Star State, right off the Gulf of America, right outside of the great city of Houston. And problem with that is they have that tropical weather and a lot of big bugs down there, so they know how to handle that. Do it the natural way. Experience the miracle at angelpaste.com, Christian-owned. They hire veterans, and we are so grateful for their sponsorship here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. I've tried that miracle cream, and let me tell you, one of the best on the market. I would highly recommend it to anyone. It made my dry hands look all glowing and shiny and fantastic, and I felt better. There's nothing more uncomfortable when you have cracked hands, throughout the day, and you have to go and shake hands, then people see that, and then the business deal does not happen. So experience the miracle today, angelpaste.com. And we are at just past the quarter of the hour as we approach 11 a.m. on the East Coast, about 8 a.m. if you're out in that golden state of California. Thank you for joining us today. We're so proud here at Right Side Broadcasting Network to bring you truly the right side of history, to be on that with opinion and commentary, analysis that you really won't find anywhere else. And what is really the big difference on our network versus anyone else out there, and there's some great people doing wonderful things, we're your go-to live desk. So if you watched us over the course of the last decade covering those big, beautiful rallies that President Trump put on, our count this year is 2 rallies. Of course, January 19th in Washington, D.C., right before he got inaugurated. And then, of course, also in Las Vegas, Nevada. We will be on those as well. If he happens to have a Saturday or two where he's like, you know what, I got to go talk to the American people, just like I used to. In that regard, and he still is through the media, but to have that forum of the rally, we all love that. We have transitioned now into this live desk. So we go to different hearings, different speeches, really covering everything inside and outside of the Beltway pertaining to America First and pertaining to your 47th president, your 50th vice president, and your 119th Congress. And if you happen to have any America First stories or want to tell us something that might be, something affecting your neck of the woods, or maybe you have a local government that's run amok, or maybe you have people on that school board who still want to put men in women's sports. We've seen that all over the country. Why don't you send us a note at feedback@rsbn.tv. That's feedback@rsbn.tv. We'd love to hear your story. We read everything through the channels and make sure that we are your voice and your advocate out there so that we can help you in this great country. Also, please subscribe at rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. We have some great writers here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. If you're just scrolling through either late at night or throughout the workday, taking that lunch break, and you want to read some great stories pertaining to everything happening in the United States and abroad, rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. And that's where you can subscribe, like, and share on all your favorite social media platforms. We appreciate you so much for being with us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, where we truly are on the right side of history. As we wait a congressional hearing featuring questions about the bias that exists and whether or not conservatives are truly being persecuted in the country. And we've seen this on a number of different levels. And that's why President Trump ultimately, when taking office, pardoned and commuted the J6 prisoners, because these people were targeted by a deep left fascist state that once existed. No longer. There are still some remnants of that, but really the founding principles and the constitutional principles of this country were put on the back burner with the auto-pen presidency of Joe Biden. And that is no longer the case with this constitutional president, Donald Trump. We also had people who were literally praying outside of Planned Parenthood, mostly Catholic voters, who simply were just speaking their piece through prayer. That is freedom of speech. That is freedom of expression. That is protected by that big, bold, beautiful First Amendment. And those people released as well. So it was really amazing to think over the course of the last 4 years how people's lives were changed in this process, and how sad that once was to see truly a big government administration that was not in control from the top down. And that's something that actually I think this Republican Congress should really look at. Who was in control during the auto-pen presidency? Who was ushering around Joe Biden? Because there were moments that he did not seem like he was there. And we know this because of the testimony of good people like Speaker Mike Johnson. He said it took him forever upon becoming Speaker to get that first meeting with President Biden. And when he finally got to the White House, several weeks into his Speaker tenure in late 2023, he was surrounded by people like then Vice President Kamala Harris, different staffers. It was really a surprise for Speaker Johnson, as he said, I thought I was having a one-on-one meeting with the president. Well, finally, after an hour or so, the president excused them from the room and said, I just have to meet with Mike personally. And the speaker said that there was some fear in their eyes. Well, they got down to talking about a specific issue in regards to lawfare and in regards to the Green New Deals that were taking place under the administration. And he said, Mike, I did not sign anything like that. He said, sir, yes, you did. And he said, I did not do that. This is according to House Speaker Mike Johnson. He said, we can go out to your secretary right now. We can pull the files. He said, Mike, I did not sign anything. So clear cognitive decline, clear lies coming from the DNC, and cover-ups coming from then Vice President Kamala Harris. And ultimately, I believe that's why she lost the election, because people did not have a free and fair process. 12 million people voted for Joe Biden in the Democrat primary. There was no competition. And then they anointed one of their weakest candidates in American history. And she went on to lose bigly and boldly. And it was President Trump's commitment to America First principles and those 20 promises made and promises kept that not only came from the first term, but now. And that became RNC policy back in Milwaukee in July of 2024 at their wonderful convention at the Fiserv Forum. And we are grateful for it every day since. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris was president? It keeps me up at night. But you know what does not keep me up at night? Because when I hit my head against my pillow, it's mypillow.com/RSBN. The spring sheet sale, save 50%. And those queen sheets, $29.98. Giza Dream Sheets, they come from the Mediterranean and they're shipped over here to Minnesota, where they are produced and made in that big, beautiful, bold facility of Mr. Mike Lindell's. He has such a wonderful staff, tremendous people. I've had the privilege of working with them on a number of different ways, all back to my Turning Point USA days, to True Social. They are kind and generous, and there is no one really like Mike Lindell. He lets the Holy Spirit flow through him. He loves his country. He loves free speech. He loves election integrity. And that's another EO that President Trump signed just the other day at the White House in order to get that ball rolling, because we need free and fair elections. It's the cornerstone of constitutional republic and democratic governance. MyPillow.com/RSBN, with over 2,000 items on the website, up to 50% off of everything. I mean, come on, what kind of deal is better than that? MyPillow.com/RSBN. Everything up to 50% off the spring sheet sale. Don't delay, call them today. Thank you, Mr. Mike Lindell, for everything you do for this country and for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And we are roughly, looks like 5 minutes away from this wonderful congressional hearing. And I'm so happy that we can bring you these hearings, because it shows you everything happening. Other networks, they might give you, that quick 5-minute soundbite or even less. And you can have someone like John Ossoff, the senator of Georgia, rudely interrupting the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, yesterday. He would not let him answer the question. And this is something that just blows my mind. And I had the privilege of asking Katie Zakaria, our wonderful Republican strategist and esteemed lawyer from the Golden State of California. I asked her about that. Did you ever berate a witness when in your legal practice? And she said, no, of course. You ask the question and you wait for the witness to answer. So somehow we've gotten into this practice, whether it be House panels, Senate panels, and of course the Senate has less members than the United States House. So sometimes it's a timing issue if you have these really big committees of 30 plus members, in some cases close to 80 or 100. And of course, time is shortened as a result. But why would you just not ask the question and let the witness answer? I'm befuddled by that. And maybe we can have some congressmen on to discuss that specific topic, because I think that's something that is at least still bipartisan in Washington, D.C., that you should be able to allow the witness to answer the question you ask of them so that it's transparent for the American people. But sadly, we still have a ruling class in the legislature that, regardless of party, they like to, kind of have that showcase and get on television. But it's really a disservice to the American people. So if any congressmen are watching out there, please, 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 when you have these hearings, ask the question, let the witness answer. If you can have follow-up, but it's not about you. It's about representing the American people. And we are also on many of the White House email lists. So they send out some great fact sheets as well about just what's going on here in the country. President Trump, he's adjusting the imports of automobile and automobile parts in the United States. This was important because you might have watched the joint meeting with of course, the Hyundai executives and Governor Jeff Landry of Louisiana, the House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Majority Leader Steve Scalise in the House, with the plants that are opening not only in Louisiana, but in Savannah, Georgia, a huge investment by Hyundai, and also Toyota, which was announced earlier in the administration. So great Japanese and Korean car companies that will be manufacturing U.S. steel and building right here in the Southeast United States, among also the Wolverine state of Michigan. Will have a lot of that manufacturing taking place once again. So a great time to be in the car business, in the steel industry, creating literally thousands of jobs on a daily basis. So President Trump is countering trade practices that threaten to impair the U.S. national security. So just this week, President Trump signed a proclamation invoking Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This will impose a 25% tariff on imports of automobiles on certain automobile parts, addressing a critical threat to the United States national security. So importers of automobiles under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement will be given the opportunity to certify their U.S. content, and systems will be implemented such that the 25% tariff will only apply to the value of their non-U.S. content. So this is all USMCA compliant, if you remember that great legislation from the first term of the Trump administration. So we'll go through more of that in a moment. Colonial Metals Group, our great sponsor here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. They truly are the best for gold and silver, for your bet against inflation and that hedge against what can take you down financially. And that's a problem because we saw credit card debt and other things skyrocket in this country over the course of the last several years. So scan that QR code now, shield your savings. freegoldguide.com/RSBN, freegoldguide.com/RSBN. Easy to remember. To get that free gold guide that really showcases the wealth that has increased with gold. It is truly a hot commodity. It never goes down, it only goes up. This is since 1971, over 7,000% in value when we went off of that gold standard during the Nixon administration until now. Think about that. Maybe we should go back on that. I've talked to Paul Stone about that, the great CEO at this company, and he really breaks that down nicely, and it's so tangible for you to understand how this will help your portfolio, whether it's properties, different assets, a 401k or IRA, which you can actually roll into gold and silver. So fun fact there. Colonial Metals Group. Make sure you scan that QR code now. Shield your savings today and do what Warren Buffett and those other people do that really have many different streamlines of income. Well, he's putting it into gold and silver. Heed the warning. Do it today. So thank you, Colonial Metals Group, for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Also, to walk through some of the other successes of the 25% tariff. It will be applied to imported passenger vehicles. So we're looking at sedans, SUVs, crossovers, minivans, cargo vans, and light trucks, as well as key automobile parts. This is engines and transmissions, electrical components as well. Well, maybe it'll have an electoral component if the Democrats get in charge again. God forbid that would happen because they hate paper ballots. We know that to be true. But this USMCA compliant automobile stance will help the president in exercising the authority under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1972 to adjust the imports to protect our national security. This also maintains a resilient domestic industrial base. Again, with the announcement of Hyundai pouring billions of dollars into the southeast United States, specifically Louisiana and Georgia, you're going to have thousands and thousands of jobs created. And in fact, when I take the trip from Auburn to Atlanta or vice versa, if you're driving up 85 there, you'll pass a Kia plant that is owned by Hyundai, and a huge success. Many people in Auburn actually who work there, they will do that commute. And it is right on the border of Georgia and Alabama, a few minutes give or take, but huge investment for Georgia. And there was a huge success and a celebration by Governor Brian Kemp just a couple of years ago. But the COVID-19 pandemic exposed these crucial vulnerabilities in our markets and the choke points in the global supply chain, and how scary that can be if you're dependent upon other nations. Like we have been with our medications in Big Pharma. Our medications are mostly made in China. We hope that changes as, of course, Bobby Kennedy working hard to make America healthy again. This specific legislation wants to create that resilient domestic base, that industrial base, again, that will create thousands of jobs. Legislation, pre-existing trade agreements like the USMCA, and these revisions to the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement and subsequent negotiations have not sufficiently mitigated the threat to national security posed by these imports. So that's something as well. It's not only the southern border, but it's our port system as well. So thank you to the U.S. Coast Guard especially. They are so vigilant, many times going without praise, without thanks for what they do on a daily basis, dealing with smugglers, whether it's human trafficking, drug trafficking, everything that goes in through our ports. This can be a billion-dollar industry for the bad guys, and our people right there to protect that, whether it's border agents or, of course, our military, specifically the U.S. Coast Guard watching our ports. So President Trump, with all of this, is looking to strengthen America's manufacturing industry. And this is what was done when President Reagan was in office. That's when you had that unbridled capitalism take place and people, American steel literally going through the roof. If we don't have manufacturing, if we don't have steel production in this country, we're donezo. And it would have been really, really bad under the communist rule of what could have been a President Kamala Harris. And how frightening is a thought of that happening. So President Trump's decision to implement tariffs on imports of automobiles and the automobile parts will protect and strengthen the U.S. automotive sector. So we'll see all of that taking place, especially back in 1985. American-owned facilities in the United States manufactured 11 million automobiles. So that represented 97% of overall domestic American and foreign-owned production of automobiles. So fast forward now to 2024, just last year. Americans bought approximately 16 million cars, SUVs, and light trucks. 50% of these vehicles were imports. So President Trump really bringing that out with using that Section 232 all the way back from 1962. And it's good to see that he's invoking these authorities that the presidency has, that the office of the executive can use. His living former predecessors, the former presidents, clearly did not want to use things like the Monroe Doctrine or even the Section 232 to protect America. But it's good that we now have a populist leader who has been speaking consistently on this ever since 1987. Gosh, when he was my age, he was on the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about how Japan was manipulating their currency and pulling a fast one on the Reagan administration. You know, and as a result, we saw what happened when President Reagan slapped that 100% tariff on the Japanese government, and then they stopped. And President Reagan is remembered for being the free trade capitalist champion. Tariffs work. It's so refreshing to see a Republican Party that believes once again in tariffs. We'd love to see our Democrat friends who once believed in that. I think of former Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, or even former Congressman Tim Ryan, who lost to then Senator J.D. Vance in that race in 2022. Claiming to be for the little guy, for the middle class, for those broad shoulders that built this American financial engine, but they turned their backs on them when lobbyists came knocking on that door, when foreign interest came pouring into Washington, D.C., under both Republican and Democrat administrations. And President Trump said, no, I'm done with it. It is not happening. We aren't doing this anymore. We are putting America first, as we should be, especially with our founding documents, as we await a congressional hearing on the INL and how it should fight crime and not be biased against conservatives. And we saw so much bias against conservatives just over the course of the last few days. We had Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois saying just awful things during his speech to the Human Rights Campaign, making these flawed, actually just insane claims on a number of different issues pertaining to President Trump, his record, and where he stands on his policies. He went so far to say what we need really is to become street fighters, and that bullies should be punched in the face. That's violent rhetoric. Why would you want to portray that as a leader of one of the largest states in America? And then, of course, we had Congresswoman from Texas, of course, Pritchett. She was just terrible with what she said about Governor Abbott. That was terrible. Call him Hot Wheels. She knew what she was doing. She called a man in a wheelchair. A tree fell on the gentleman when he was 26 years old, and it broke his back. He's in a wheelchair. He's doing a great job leading the Lone Star State of Texas. Is that the best way to dialogue with one another? Is that the best way to move the country forward? So come on, Democrats, let's step up. And these are our elected Democrats. They are not representing the people. They're rather representing their own agenda. and sad to see on a daily basis, but that's okay. Come and join the big tent that is the MAGA movement, because we have smiles on our face, and a great way to remember this MAGA populist movement is with a Trump Force One replica plane. I have one of these myself, and it's over at patriotaddictdeals.com. When I got this back in the fall, they only had 200 available, and they went lickety-split. So you want to claim your 20% off today using code RSBN20, Trump Force One airplane. It is great for your MAGA man cave, that MAGA office. It lets everyone know just where you stand on the crucial issues affecting this beautiful country. PatriotAddictDeals.com. I have to be honest, I am very, very careful about going to this website because it is just great stuff that's on there, and they are limited edition things. So get that Trump Force plane today, that wonderful replica that will look so nice in your foyer, your MAGA office, or that MAGA man cave. I just think about fall and football and just putting that man cave airplane right there. I mean, it'd just be great. So enjoy that today. PatriotAddictDeals.com. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. And there's a live look at the White House as we await this congressional hearing to focus on fighting crime. And that's what it's really been all about in this administration. It is truly the law and order administration. It is getting back to those foundational principles that have made America great. When you think about other countries too, everyone has some form of border system. I mean, we've seen that change a lot with European nations over the course of the last few years, and the message has been regret, regret, regret having open borders and really changing culture and a civilization built on not only a Western philosophy of a Renaissance thought of fraternity and liberty, but also the influence of the church and Christianity throughout the ages and throughout the generations. We've seen that change a lot in Europe recently, but no nation can stand if it does not have proper borders. And that does not mean that is somehow anti-immigrant. President Trump is one of the most pro-immigrant presidents, but it's pro-legal immigration. His wife, our beautiful First Lady, a legal immigrant. His mother, a legal immigrant. We celebrate this month that Irish American Heritage Proclamation about the immigrants who came here during the 19th and 20th centuries from the Emerald Isle. And many of them, if they came during the Civil War, were not aware that a Civil War was taking place, and that Irish Brigade in New York, that beautiful battalion up there, still has the namesake of the Irish ancestry, because they literally got off those boats and they went to war to defend and save this beautiful union from secession and separation, and ultimately to end the scourge of slavery. And then you look at those who came over at the turn of the century, in the 20th century, my family around 1906. They settled in big cities like Boston and New York and Chicago and changed literally the landscape with skyscrapers and with becoming police officers and firemen, becoming some of the most recognized politicians and big political names, whether Republican or Democrat, in all of American history. So it's something to be honored and to celebrate. And President Trump put his signature on that just a couple short weeks ago as he met with the Irish Prime Minister before St. Patrick's Day, of course. And that's an annual beautiful celebration. And you can see really the, I think, true nature between leaders. President Trump hosting 10 of them at the White House within his tenure thus far, and you see the camaraderie, you see the mutual respect, you see the willingness to seek peace through strength, and also better, more equitable, fair, and truly free trade agreements that do not take advantage of the United States nor those countries that we're visiting. And we're very much watching the 30-day ceasefire deal that was brokered by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, of course, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with Steve Witkoff, the mission envoy to the Middle East, also someone who helped bring back Mark Fogel from Russia, just an outstanding public servant who is giving so much of his time, talent, and treasure to this administration, as countless others are doing as well. So it is a bright new dawn. It's morning in America, as the Reagan coalition once said. And I see so much correlation between President Reagan and, of course, President Trump in not only their style, but also those great principles that they have pushed, and the use of tariffs, the use of very simple philosophy. We win, they lose. And we will negotiate, we will speak, we will do whatever necessary in order to achieve what's hard. But we will not back down. We will not be afraid. And we saw that with the unveiling of the 6th generation fighters under President Trump. Of course, they couldn't detail all of that beautiful plane when he was in the Oval Office with Secretary Pete Hegseth and Air Force generals. But as you saw there, it will travel faster than the speed of sound. And I was talking to Matthew Alvarez about this, that I started to hear that Top Gun theme in my head. And I almost thought, did Top Gun predict it before it actually happened? I don't know. Maybe Tom Cruise, a closet patriot. If you've seen Top Gun Maverick as well, some great films. And it details what was happening, really under the Biden administration, that our old fighter jets were up against next-gen fighters, whether it be China or Russia or other superpowers. So thank God we have a commander-in-chief who wants a military so strong that we will, God willing, never have to use it. But thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, angelpaste.com. We love this wonderful company out of Spring, Texas, Christian-owned. They hire veterans as well. So experience the miracle today. This vitamin B-filled miracle cream will make your dry hands smooth and shiny and just perfect when you go on that night on the town and paint the town red. But of course, here with this miracle cream, you will be equipped with everything you need to enjoy that. And they also have other options, whether it is the orange option. It's an immunity booster filled with vitamin C. So that will help you during this change of seasons from winter into springtime. Of course, also can combat that nasty pollen wherever you might be. We see that every day here. And I don't really have the allergies, which is great, but I definitely see a difference when I walk outside and I'm like, how did my car turn yellow? But that's a hysterical thing to watch this time of year. They also have mosquito repellent that's all natural. So a great opportunity here. Experience the miracle, angelpaste.com. They also have facial products and great manly men lines. So guys, don't worry about visiting angelpaste.com. It will be good for you as well as for the ladies. Experience that miracle today. Angelpaste.com. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And there again, that beautiful shot of the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, your house, the people's house. Please, 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 if you have the opportunity, go visit it. Take that summer break or whatever break is coming up with the kiddos and go see American democracy in action. And who knows, President Trump's there, he might just surprise your tour, as he did a couple of months ago when Melania Trump, our gracious First Lady, reopened that to the public. And it's a great tour. I haven't done the main tour for a couple of years now, actually more than a couple of years. Back in 2006, I was in high school, had the opportunity to see that during the Bush administration. And at the time, the 9/11 rules were in place. So the only way you could access the White House is if the president was gone. And that's all null and void now. And you get more access, so you might just run into your favorite president, of course, Donald Trump. But we got the tour, went in through the East Room, or the East Side and the East Wing into the first floor, which is just so ornate and filled with history. And you see the portraits of the president, and immediately my mind went to the fact of, wow, every president since John Adams has lived at this residence. Only George Washington was not able to live there as it was being built during his presidency. And just the amount of the weight of the presidency, but also the beauty of it. And I thought about, wow, how many presidents have walked these halls making those big decisions late into the evening? Because it is a home, after all, and it's where our first family can recline after all of the stresses that the job brings. But President Trump makes it look easy. So a great summer trip, and contact your congressman as well, because you might be able to get to see that beautiful Capitol building there and maybe stand right under that rotunda where President Trump took his second oath of office 40 years to the day exactly, January 20th, after Ronald Reagan was the last president to take his second official inaugural within the rotunda, both days due to blustery winter weather and cold temperatures. So it's almost more ornate, though, when it is under that rotunda versus being on the west portico, although it was sad to see some people could not see it right there in that moment, but the fun was being had at many pubs and different parties throughout Washington, D.C., if you caught our coverage during the inauguration. Well, stick with us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. I'm Robert McNeely. Pleasure to be with you here on this beautiful Thursday. We're awaiting a congressional hearing on the bias that takes place against conservatives, so stick with us on the other end. We'll go to a quick commercial break.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed, so join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from the Diamond and Silk Chit Chat live show. Look, don't forget to check me out right here on RSBN Network. Be sure to watch the show on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. Yes, it's imperative that you do so, okay? I look to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Giving us your time and your expertise, always welcome. So the Bureau...
The main event this morning underway in Washington, D.C.
For years, they have been more interested in security through ideology, trading fight against narcotics for seminars to teach pronouns, and workshops on gender diversity. I believe that the result of this alien ideology has been damaging to our national security, especially in a region which is very close to my heart, Central America. As some of you know, I was the Central American Bureau Chief for Univision Network during the Civil War in El Salvador. I lived in that country for many years until 1992 when they signed a peace treaty. Central America, don't I know it, has suffered for decades, and this was the perfect time to help them. Let's go to Guatemala. Almost 9 million migrants passed through their territory trying to come to the United States in the last 4 years. The Guatemalans needed INL's assistance to tackle that human trafficking and narcotics. But unfortunately, the Biden administration refused to work with the Attorney General of that country because apparently she was too conservative. They sanctioned her. Her name is Consuelo Porras. was killed. I was killed. Yeah. I was about to be killed in few instances. I lived it. I know it. And things were terrible in El Salvador until President Bukele arrived in the picture. El Salvador should have been a perfect partner for the INL Bureau, which, by the way, it says that its mandate is to bring down transnational criminal organizations like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. But instead of training the Salvadorian police forces, INL, Law Enforcement Academy, taught gender and inclusion as one of their main goals for El Salvador. I'm sure that at that moment, the Salvadorians were going to be saying the gringos have gone crazy. I am no law enforcement expert, but I am fairly confident that getting MS-13 to learn how to pronounce correctly pronouns is not going to dissuade them from committing any crimes. I am a witness. I have spoken to him that Bukele wants to work with the United States, but instead the Biden administration cut funds to the Salvadorian police by 50%. Why? And INL concentrated its budget for El Salvador to give it to NGOs that attack his security plan. With or without us, Bukele was successful. His strategy reduced one of the world's highest homicide rates to nearly zero. He presented this strategy to INL, and they said, no, we're not going to work with you. During the last 4 years, unfortunately, woke ideology has replaced common sense, but thankfully, things have changed under President Trump, and we're going to return the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs to its original mission, which is helping our allies fight crime, dismantling gangs, restoring law and order. They have a budget of $2 billion a year, and I think we owe it to the American taxpayers to commit and reestablish their mandate, finding drugs, stopping human trafficking, training police forces worldwide with American-made weapons bought by our allies. INL is one of the best tools we have as Americans to create a safer, stronger, and more prosperous country while helping our neighbors to do the same, whether it's in Central America or anywhere else in the world. I believe that we are still the United States. We're the point of reference for the rest of the hemisphere, at least when it comes to good governance, the beacon of hope, that there is a political system that respects human dignity. Thank God we're back on the right side of history. I yield back. And now I recognize my dear ranking member, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro, for any statements he may have.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chairwoman, for convening this hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for testifying at this subcommittee's first hearing in this Congress. The topic of this hearing is broadly to discuss the reauthorization of the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. This is certainly important, and I look forward to the discussion on this issue. But I first need to paint a picture of what's going on right now. In just the last few weeks, we've witnessed a deeply troubling pattern of executive overreach and undermining of congressional authority. The administration has attempted to dismantle congressionally established agencies, USAID, the Inter-American Foundation, and the U.S. African Development Foundation, all without a single hearing from this committee where the administration has defended its actions. The Trump administration is trying to shut down the U.S. Agency for Global Media, a move cheered by autocrats and dictators from Havana to Moscow to Beijing to Caracas. They're trying to do this without this committee, the full committee, demanding the administration even explain themselves. The committee has given up its role of oversight. It has abandoned any oversight of the Trump administration, which is astounding in the history of Congress. The committee has we as a nation, because of the Trump administration, have abandoned brave human rights defenders in Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and everywhere else in the world as we went back on our word and froze programs that support them. We left them to get rounded up and put in prison. That is what this administration has done. The committee has not called Secretary Rubio in or any other administration official to explain these actions. That's why I say they have abandoned any oversight responsibilities. Donald Trump has canceled temporary protected status and humanitarian parole for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Cubans who have sought refuge in our country, as millions of people have over generations. These were people who had status to be here. This is after President Trump said that he would only go after criminals. Masked ICE agents are pulling people off the streets in Texas, in Florida, and in cities across our country and sending them to prisons in El Salvador without any due process at all. President Bukele has become a mercenary for prisoners to house prisoners from the United States and I imagine other parts of the world. Every day we learn of new horrors and innocent people brutalized by the administration. To do this, the Trump administration has used a wartime authority, the Alien Enemies Act, and claimed that we are being invaded by Venezuela. The idea that we're currently at war with Venezuela would be news to most Americans. In fact, it would be news to almost all Americans. If we're truly at war, I certainly think this committee should be holding a hearing on it. Unfortunately, what we're seeing from the Republican majority is a total surrender of their power as legislators. Why hasn't this committee demanded testimony from Secretary Rubio, Pete Marocco, and others on all of this? We need answers. We need accountability, and we need this committee to do its job. We meet at a time when the United States is facing serious, complex threats abroad, and the responses from this Congress and this administration have too often been silence, confusion, or political theater. Across the world, vital U.S. foreign assistance programs, many of them managed through the INL Bureau, have been cut, delayed, or outright canceled. We've seen freezes to police academy training in Mexico, programs designed to disrupt human trafficking, and efforts to equip law enforcement agencies across the globe with the tools to fight money laundering, fentanyl production, and organized crime. These aren't just line items in a budget. They're lifelines to communities here and abroad. The impacts of those decisions are not abstract. They absolutely make Americans less safe. When you see more fentanyl entering this country, when violent cartels operate with impunity, this is part of the reason why. These decisions will haunt us in the coming years. As we turn specifically to the reauthorization of the INL Bureau and its programs, we must approach reauthorization with clear eyes. INL has been a critical tool in our foreign policy toolkit, but I agree that it must evolve. Synthetic drugs like fentanyl are not only devastating American families, they're destabilizing entire regions. Scam centers and cyber-enabled fraud schemes are preying on our most vulnerable citizens. INL must be equipped and reoriented to tackle these challenges. At the same time, we must resist the impulse to think that security means police alone. Sustainable progress requires more than just training and equipping security forces. It means building robust justice systems, effective prosecutors, professional judges, strong defense attorneys, independent courts, prisons, and investing in the civil society actors who hold their leaders accountable. Funding police while defunding anti-corruption and rule of law programs is not just short-sighted, it's dangerous and it's counterproductive. Today's hearing is an opportunity to begin a serious, hopefully sober conversation about what INL needs to succeed and what reforms we need to pursue to ensure its work aligns with our values, advances our interests, and keeps our communities safe. Thank you, Chairwoman, and I yield back.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Castro. Thank you for your statement. And now we are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. Let me introduce Mrs. Chelsea Kenny. She's the Director, International Affairs and Trade for the United States Government Accountability Office. Thank you and welcome. Mr. Andres Martinez Fernandez, Senior Policy Analyst, Latin America, Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation. And Mr. Adam Isaacson, Director for Defense Oversight, Washington Office on Latin America. And this committee recognizes the importance of the issues before us and is grateful to have you here to speak to us today. Your full statements will be made part of the record, and I will ask each of you to keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for members' questions. Now I recognize Ms. Kenny for her opening statement.
Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our findings and recommendations related to the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. INL contributes to some of the U.S. government's top security priorities. These include combating the flow of illicit narcotics into the U.S., promoting rule of law around the world, and combating transnational crime. We have reviewed many of INL's programs in recent years and identified successes as well as opportunities for improvement in at least 15 reports, many at the request of this committee. Since 2020, we have made 16 recommendations to improve the effectiveness of INL programs. I will highlight 3 key areas of improvement related to performance management, program monitoring, and program evaluation. First, we have made 5 recommendations to improve how INL is managing the performance of its projects. Of these, INL has implemented 1 recommendation on combating firearms trafficking in Mexico, but 4 related to firearms trafficking in the Caribbean and on assistance to Mexico more broadly remain unaddressed. Performance management is meant to ensure that the U.S. government is spending taxpayer dollars effectively and achieving U.S. goals. For example, since 2008, the U.S. has provided over $3 billion in assistance to Mexico to address crime and violence and enhance the country's rule of law. However, in 2023, we reported that INL could not demonstrate that it was achieving its goals because of gaps in its approach to performance management. Specifically, we found that INL had established goals and objectives but had not identified which of its projects were key to achieving them. So, for example, under the goal of preventing trans-border crime, INL had established a joint objective with Mexico to disrupt and dismantle narcotics production. However, while INL implemented and collected data on individual projects, it had not linked which of these projects were helping to meet this goal. We recommended that INL strengthen its performance management approach to determine whether it was achieving its goals in Mexico. Considering the importance of the U.S.-Mexico relationship and the level of U.S. investment, we have identified this to be a priority recommendation for the agency. Second, we have made 6 recommendations to improve INL's program monitoring. Of these, INL has implemented 3, but 3 related to its wildlife trafficking programs remain unaddressed. Consistent program monitoring helps assess progress and identify problems that might prevent the Bureau from reaching its goals. Wildlife trafficking is a crime that fuels corruption and destabilizes communities. In recent years, media reports have alleged that park rangers, trained by U.S.-funded entities, had committed human rights abuses, including sexual assault and murder. Since 2020, state has taken steps to enhance safeguards to prevent these abuses. However, we found that INL had not conducted consistent program monitoring to ensure that these U.S.-funded entities reported on the implementation or effectiveness of these safeguards. We also found an alleged incident of sexual abuse by a ranger that INL was unaware of. INL agreed with our recommendations, including that it clarify reporting requirements for human rights abuses. Third, we've made 2 recommendations to INL to conduct program evaluations, or studies that would determine how well a program is working. For example, in 2024, we reported that despite years of support for activities to strengthen the security situation in Haiti, including specific efforts to improve the capacity of Haiti's national police, INL had no formal plans to evaluate the effectiveness of its activities. We recommended that INL conduct such an evaluation, and the Bureau agreed. INL plays a critical role in achieving U.S. security priorities, such as combating transnational crime and supporting rule of law worldwide. INL's effectiveness depends on robust performance management, program monitoring, and program evaluation. While INL has made some progress, important gaps remain. We urge INL to fully implement our recommendations to help ensure that it is spending taxpayer dollars effectively and achieving U.S. goals. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Kenny. And now I recognize Mr. Martinez-Fernandez for his opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and members for holding this hearing and inviting me to participate. The Western Hemisphere is experiencing a period of surging instability, violence, and criminality, largely driven by increasingly powerful criminal organizations. From Haiti's collapse at the hands of gangs, newfound narco violence in a once peaceful Ecuador, increasingly deadly drug cartels in Mexico and Colombia, and more, we are constantly confronted by evidence of a failed status quo for security in our hemisphere. These threats do not stay in Latin America. Instead, they drive increasingly deadly and destabilizing consequences to the United States and directly to the American people. The absence of robust and effective security engagement from the United States in Latin America is a key driver of the current state of affairs. Indeed, the collapse of the hemispheric consensus on counter-narcotics is due in no small part to decisions on the part of Washington to blunt and curb its security cooperation in the Americas away from the core support from regional security forces. This trend is driven in part by Washington's focus on other foreign conflicts, as well as a series of challenges that we continue to focus on in other parts of the world. However, the impact and inattention that this has brought has been exacerbated by mission drift and the watering down of critical institutions like the State Department's International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Bureau. Additionally, hemispheric security and stability has suffered from the Biden administration's politicization of U.S. security engagement and tools in Latin America. The so-called expert consensus on Latin America's security policy has shifted dramatically over the past 2 decades, prompting detrimental changes in the nature and magnitude of U.S. security cooperation. Vocal leaders and activists have successfully framed organized crime in Latin America as primarily being an issue of economic development and judicial institutions, de-emphasizing in particular the role of enforcement and security forces. Today, at the core of this new conventional wisdom in many circles in Washington and in the region is increasingly the poorly substantiated claim that confronting Latin America's powerful criminal organizations only serve to exacerbate insecurity and criminality. One of the key events that provided support for this view was the spike in violence in Mexico during the late 2000s following President Felipe Calderón's efforts to crack down on the cartels. However, notably today, after over a decade during which the Mexican government has pulled back from confronting the cartels, Mexico's homicides rates now exceed the worst years of violence during the Calderón administration. Add to that the over 100,000 overdose deaths in the United States due to fentanyl and other deadly drugs. Indeed, Mexico's disastrous hugs not bullets strategy on the cartels showcases the dire consequences of de-emphasizing enforcement and security forces in our security policies in the Western Hemisphere. When President Andrés Manuel López Obrador with Mexico, the Merida Initiative drifted away from its initial focus of providing training, equipment, and operational support to Mexican security forces, and instead shifted support to, U.S. support shifted for reform of the Mexican judicial system increasingly. Then, when President López Obrador fully abandoned the Merida Initiative, the new security cooperation framework further de-emphasized security forces and the role of enforcement as a core aspect of security policy. In both Mexico, Colombia, and elsewhere, the United States failed to push back on regional leaders' abandonment of security cooperation and commitments. This was particularly egregious under the Biden administration, where we saw the increase of deaths of American people reaching 100,000 each year due to fentanyl and other drugs. And yet we did not adequately push the administration in Mexico to address the security threat posed by the cartels. Even worse, at times the Biden administration leaned into its wrong-headed approach within the region to leaned into this wrong-headed approach on organized crime by regional leaders. In the case of Colombia, President Biden actively drew attention away from Colombia's deteriorating security situation by ending the long-standing program of U.S. monitoring of coca cultivation. To confront the dire threats posed by organized crime in our hemisphere, the U.S. security assistance through INL and other critical agencies should be bolstered and refocused on the core mission of counter-narcotics and transnational organized crime. Failure to do so urgently will bring increasingly deadly consequences for Latin America and for the American people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez-Fernandez. I now recognize Mr. Isaacson for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, thank you so much for holding this hearing and for inviting me. The State Department's Bureau of INL manages the largest U.S. aid account for security forces in Latin America and the Caribbean, though it pays for other things too. Worldwide, it's about $1.5 billion. In our hemisphere, it's at least $600 million. Now, for years, INL was jokingly known as the Drugs and Thugs Bureau. Its success was measured in hectares eradicated and kilos seized and kingpins arrested. That narrow focus reflects its 1980s era statute, and it hasn't really worked. You don't have to take my word for it. Just look at overdose deaths, look at street prices. Meanwhile, our understanding of organized crime and how to combat it has evolved. Yes, drugs are still a top revenue stream for criminal groups, but crime groups also make billions from gold mining, migrant smuggling, extortion, and more, sometimes with even bigger profits than they're getting from drugs. The drug market itself has shifted towards synthetics like fentanyl and meth, which don't involve most of Latin America outside Mexico. And mass migration has made the question urgent. How can we help people feel safe enough to stay in their own communities? This reframes success. It's no longer just kilos and hectares. It's whether people feel secure. It's whether justice works. It's whether officials fear punishment for corruption. To its credit, INL has shifted. It no longer tries to fight crime the way you'd fight a guerrilla insurgency. While guerrillas fight governments, organized crime infiltrates them and hollows them out by bribing, threatening, co-opting, and corrupting. That makes it a much harder, much more complex fight. Now, in response, INL has begun putting more emphasis on the L, rule of law, and civilian law enforcement, rather than just the N. Funding has increasingly gone to prosecutors, judicial institutions, police academies, oversight bodies, and independent experts and investigators. A whole comprehensive security sector, a table with many legs, and not just the people wearing uniforms. There's a growing realization that real progress is going to take time, and it depends on breaking collusion between government and crime. That's why efforts like the Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, the CICIG, mattered so much. Brave people made historic anti-corruption gains, and INL was there to support them. Ironically, de-narcotizing INL's mission may be the best way to reduce drug supplies in the long term. But that shift also means we need to rethink some obsolete frameworks like the annual drug certification process. As the 2020 Western Hemisphere Drug Policy Commission noted, it's a relic. It hasn't been used to seriously cut aid since the 1990s, and even then, a Republican majority Congress and a Democratic White House scrambled in the late 90s to restore it when security began deteriorating in Colombia. So yes, INL needs reform. WOLA supports a serious rethink to bring the Bureau and its statutes into the mid-21st century. What we don't support is a rushed 90-day review full of abrupt freezes and cuts with no input from partners around the world, many of whom have been risking their lives to fight corruption and crime and really depend on their relationship with us. The little we've seen of the proposed cuts so far is worrying. Aid to police and military agencies looks mostly untouched, but support to civil society, justice institutions, UN programs, that looks like it's cut by about half. That risks turning INL back into what it once was, a little drugs and thugs bureau. And we know where that leads. Brief dips in violence or drug supplies, followed by resurgence. It's just a constant game of whack-a-mole. Organized crime figures get taken down, but organized crime remains strong. Corrupt officials keep operating with impunity. People keep fleeing their homes, often coming here. I'm not asking to preserve the status quo. Frankly, I can't defend much of it because I can't see it. Public reporting on INL aid has become vague, inconsistent, and far less quantitative. It's hard to track where the money goes and what it achieves, and reporting requirements, if we do reauthorize INL, have to improve. That right now, oversight is difficult, and it makes the whole program hard to defend when an administration comes to power questioning its entire value. This committee can help. First, it can urge INL to keep expanding its focus on organized crime, corruption, and citizen security, not just counter-narcotics. Second, it can press for much better transparency. Third, it can insist that any reform effort be thoughtful, inclusive, and deliberate, not a 90-day rollback. There's lots of space for bipartisan agreement here, I think. I look forward to exploring that here and any other time that you'd like in the future. Thank you again for organizing this discussion.
And thank you, Mr. Isaacson. And now for your testimony, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. And I am delighted to hear, Mr. Isaacson, that you believe certain quotes here that INL needs to be modernized, needs to be reformed, and that maybe they are just following some of the precepts of the 1980s. But specifically, I agree that they are not, that they need to be reorganized and there needs to be some revamped. But let's go to the last 4 years. Do you really believe that talking to the Guatemalans and to the Salvadorians about gender ideology or the pronouns or how that there are many genders, do you really think that talking to them was going to make the United States and themselves safer? Safer? I mean, you were going to keep people home? So explain how one thing comes to link to the other.
I would like to know what percentage of the program actually was about gender and identity and things like that. If it's, we don't have that data.
The main focus, the Guatemalans were complaining.
In terms of dollar amounts?
And of course, and in terms of political willingness and desire to infiltrate these forces with our ideology, the American Biden administration ideology. Don't you think that we did a disservice to them and to us?
If you're fighting human trafficking, where most victims are women,
yeah,
you need
how can you be
more of a
talking
gender
about
focus.
sex
you're
when you're trying to fight
gender-based
human
violence,
trafficking? How do you
that's
do
true.
that?
I just need to know, how much of the programming really did go in that direction instead of like Joint Task Force Alpha in Guatemala, which was fighting human smugglers.
The Guatemalans, perfect example. They hated a lady by the name of Consuelo Porras. Do I know her? No, I don't. But I know that she's the AG of the country, so why don't we work with her? Oh, because she's too conservative. Who are we to say that to the Guatemalans? Why?
I don't know if Consuelo Porras is
no,
hated.
it's quote. Everything I'm saying is quoted. Consuelo Porras is detested.
Oh, I think she is detested.
It was okay. Yeah. Well, but who are we, the Americans, to come and say, oh, Consuelo is not the person that you need to work with? She's the AG.
I've never heard that she was held at arm's length because she favored free markets or
she was too conservative.
Because she was conservative, because of significant corruption, according to what I saw.
You know what I'm telling you. So please help me understand why the Biden administration wanted to concentrate its resources when it talks to reforming and securing the Salvadorian Guatemalan police, concentrated on something that had nothing to do with national security for the United States.
My impression was that INL and the Justice Department worked very hard with, not with Consuelo, but with the rest of the public ministry in Guatemala on something called Joint Task Force Alpha, which was a big effort to get at the nodes of the network of migrant smuggling. And they've actually taken out a lot of migrant smugglers, working with the Attorney General's office in Guatemala in the last few years. And the Trump administration is expanding that.
Did you know this? Would give money to the NGOs in Guatemala to help the migrants have a smoother ride while they were going through Guatemala and getting to Mexico.
I think that would have been illegal in Guatemala, where they actually arrest and deport more than 20,000, 30,000 migrants a year back into Honduras.
9 million went through it. All right,
yeah, a lot do get through.
Let's go to El Salvador. Bukele, what do you think? What ranking do you give to Bukele from 1 to 10?
I would give him a 4, perhaps. I think he's a brilliant communicator, but I do worry about checks and balances.
Communicator. What has he done with the country?
He has put 3% of the male population in prison, which, yeah, by doing so, did eradicate, for now, a lot of the gangs.
And you and I agreed that if there's one innocent guy in the Sikot, I was the first one who told him, you got to get him out because we don't want innocent people in jail. But the thing is that, you know, Sikot is full of people who are full of tattoos that are revealing who they were and what they did. You know, each drop meant one murder. So do you think he did something right?
If these people were facing judges, and if their families knew what was going on with them, it would be right. But right now, almost everybody there is pretrial, and there's not even dates for most of their trials. So yeah, they need a fair shake. I mean, it was right to clean out the streets.
I agree with you that everyone needs due process. Yes, sir.
And that's just not happening right now.
All right, but what about us working with him? And maybe if INL would have done its job, then Bukele would have been able to really help. We would help him to do a better job, don't you think? Talking about diversity and inclusion and pronouns.
I think one of INL's biggest obstacles actually there is, and I actually support it, is language that both Republicans and Democrats put in the foreign aid bill saying that half of aid, I believe it's half, to El Salvador is cut until they can certify that the human rights situation is good and is improving. And right now, more than 300 people dying in the jails in the last 3 years and widespread allegations of torture. It's been hard to certify that.
What happens to the human rights of the people who were outside being killed by those gang members, which is why he got 90% of transparent and internationally observed elections. We agree with that,
Oh, yeah,
right?
if I was a shopkeeper being
The Salvadorians love the
extorted.
guy, so why do we have to hate him? Who are we to say to this guy, don't do it that way?
I think we're just worried about what it's going to look like in 5 years. But yeah, right now, if I'm a shopkeeper who had to pay...
Don't you think that they should be concerned about what they're going to be looking like 5 years from now? That's their concern, not ours. We're here to help them have a better police force. All right? Do you agree with that, right?
We're certainly here to help them have a better police force, but we don't want to be funding abuses in the short term.
I think that I'm exceeding my time. I yield back. Now I'm going to recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, I want to take up this issue really quickly because, you know, we disagree, Maria, on this. I don't think there's ever been a bias of the United States against conservative leaders and in favor of leftist leaders. In fact, when you look at the history of the U.S. involvement in Latin America has often, I mean, the United States, unfortunately, in decades past, worked to undermine the leadership of leaders on the left and treated leaders on the right as friends. And in fact, supported what were some of the most brutal dictatorships, like the Pinochet ruling in Chile. And so, you know, when we think about how we provide U.S. assistance, how we provide taxpayer money, the way we should be thinking about it is who is operating consistent with U.S. values and what we stand for. So democracy, freedom, respect for human rights. Really, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, whether you're on the left or the right as a leader, we ought to support leaders who are pursuing those things. And so Consuelo Porras, as I understand, have been sanctioned for severe corruption. That's why we're not working with her, not because she's got a certain ideology. You know, and Bukele also, I think it's true. I mean, he has gotten a lot of crime off the streets and has scared a lot of people, especially young men. But so has Xi Jinping in China. And so, you know, if the question is, well, why don't we just let people do what they're going to do? Okay, I get that. But the question for us is, are we going to back them up with money to commit human rights abuses and other things that we would never allow for in the United States ourselves? Now, bear in mind, in the last few weeks, we've seen some disturbing instances of people literally been picked off the street for having exercised their First Amendment rights by government agents who don't identify themselves, who aren't dressed in uniform, and who barely present credentials, if at all. Those are the kinds of activities that you're used to seeing in countries that violate people's rights. So just, with that disagreement, let me get into a question really quick. Ms. Kenney, as you know, the administration is conducting multiple reviews of foreign assistance programs, and I believe those programs have been incredibly disruptive and that the review has not been done in good faith. In 2019, the first Trump administration did something similar on a smaller scale. They unilaterally froze $400 million in foreign assistance funding in Central America for over 14 months. At the time, I, along with other colleagues, requested the GAO assess the impacts of that freeze. The GAO determined that many programs, including State Department INL Bureau programs, had been adversely affected. And based on your experience with the 2019 freeze, do you expect adverse effects from the ongoing freeze on many INL programs?
Thank you for that question. Yes, when we reviewed the freeze in 2019, we found that there were a number of adverse effects. To the State Department, we found that about 65 or 39% of INL programs actually suffered adverse effects, where they had to reduce the geographical region in which they were implementing programs. They had to reduce the number of beneficiaries who could participate in trainings. They had to reduce the quality of programs. And programs that relied on implementing partners suffered even more consequences because they had to lay people off and they were unable to pick up those programs when the funding resumed. However, that funding was really just a freeze of one-year funding, and in a lot of ways, those programs were able to continue because of funding that was still available in the pipeline from prior year's funding. We haven't had an opportunity to review the funding freeze that is occurring right now, but my understanding is that those programs aren't able to access prior year funding either, and so my understanding is that they're not continuing at all. We haven't had. I'm sorry.
Sure, no, and thank you for that. And let me ask a follow-up really quick. Will the GAO be willing to conduct a review of the ongoing freeze and cancellation of hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign assistance programs?
Yes, we'd be happy to do that work.
Thank you so much. With that, I yield back, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Castro, and now give the opportunity to Representative Lawler from the state of New York.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It's common practice for transnational criminal organizations in South and Central America to source precursor chemicals from China and synthesize illicit substances like fentanyl. These criminal organizations then traffic them into the United States, where they have infiltrated far too many communities and led to unimaginable tragedies for a lot of families across our nation. 70,000 Americans are dying on an annual basis from fentanyl overdose. Mr. Martinez-Fernandez, how do you assess INL's role in stopping the influx of deadly fentanyl into the United States?
Well, clearly, INL and the U.S. government is not adequately acting either on resources or focus to stop the flow of fentanyl. As you mentioned, over 70,000 just overdose death just from fentanyl. When you add in all the other illicit drugs, 100,000. And so I think there's a very real resource question that has to be addressed. There's also a partnership and cooperation side to that, where our relationship with Mexico, particularly over the past 4 years under the Biden administration, cooperation, security cooperation, was almost non-existent. Even offers to support port security to identify fentanyl precursors coming in were rejected by the Mexican government. And the challenges of migration, which grew out of control under the Biden administration as well, led to a deprioritization, in my opinion, of the fentanyl threat with dire consequences. Now, President Trump has obviously rallied significant resources, particularly from the Department of Defense to the border. I think that's an important aspect of the confronting of this threat. But we also need to press the Mexican government to take action. And there's also certainly the administration is making progress on that front and bringing to bear some economic tools. I think INL is going to play an important role because at some point we need to restore the security relationship with Mexico to a functional arrangement with actually targeting the cartels rather than just having symbolic actions by the Mexican government be the sum total of the relationship, which is essentially what we've seen for the past 4 years.
So what can INL do to address China's role related to the precursor chemicals that are exported into Mexico and other parts of the Western Hemisphere?
So I think certainly with the Chinese presence in Mexico is also significant. So there's action to go after some of the brokers as well as some of the trade infrastructure, which is utilized by the Chinese in Mexico to facilitate the flow of illicit precursors. I think that more action also needs to be done in Asia on this front. We've seen movement of illicit fentanyl supply chains even out of China. Unfortunately, we don't have a cooperative relationship on this issue with the government in China. So there are significant limitations on INL's ability to act there. But I think ensuring that in Mexico in particular, we're confronting the presence of Chinese criminal organizations, as well as further south. We've already seen in countries like Guatemala the movement of these illicit supply chains of fentanyl to new countries, and we need to make sure that we're reinforcing border security, port security, and those security relationships to make sure that it doesn't just migrate to another country.
In what way is the INL working with other entities within the U.S. government, like the DEA, on this particular issue, and how can they improve upon that to really crack down on this? Obviously, we have a demand issue in this country that is part of the problem of the deadly flow of fentanyl.
Yeah. So I think there is some important cooperation with other agencies, particularly the Department of Homeland Security, on the issue of border security within the region and ensuring that regional partners can have those capacities to ensure that those flows don't move through their country without their ability to intercept them. And on the U.S. side and the demand side that you referred to, I think as I understand it, there's some conversations happening here in Congress about potential changes as far as consequences, judicial consequences in the United States, that are going to align, I think, the reality of the threats and the deadliness of this drug with the consequences that people face.
Thank you, Representative Lawler. And now I give the word to Representative Stanton of the state of Arizona. You have
Thank you very much.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The fentanyl crisis is especially acute in my home state of Arizona, where thousands of Arizonans die from opioid overdose every single year. I know my colleagues and I across the aisle agree. We need to do more to stop the flow of fentanyl and other deadly narcotics into the United States of America. That's why I'm at a loss to understand why the Trump administration has moved to cut funding for the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs work in Mexico. Drastic cuts. INL works across law enforcement agencies, intergovernmental agencies, and with the courts in our partner countries to disrupt the illicit drug trafficking and bring criminals to justice. Under previous administrations and with funding approved in a bipartisan manner, Mexico has been the third largest recipient of INL funds. INL supports more than 100 projects working to combat fentanyl trafficking and transnational crime by providing services, training, and much-needed equipment. One project that has benefited from the INL has deployed cargo scanners and drug testing equipment to Mexico's port of Manzanillo, critical technology to detect and interdict precursor chemicals from the People's Republic of China. Another INL project supported a recent operation in Tucson, Arizona, that led to the arrest of drug trafficking leader and 6 other operatives, a good return on taxpayer investment. Since the Trump administration's freeze on foreign aid, only 15% of INL's programs in Mexico have received waivers to resume their work, and many of those have not yet received payment. As former ambassador and Marine helicopter pilot John Feely phrased it recently, quote, "They shot the golden goose right in the leg," unquote. Make no mistake about it. The Trump administration is hamstringing our response to fentanyl in the region, and while using this crisis as a justification to raise taxes on working families through the misguided across-the-board tariffs on Mexico. Mr. Isaacson, how does this massive cut to INL program hamper our ability to stem the flow of fentanyl into the United States?
It definitely deals a blow to our efforts against fentanyl. This is the hardest drug challenge we've ever faced. All pure fentanyl that's consumed in the United States in a year can fit in the beds of 2 or 3 pickup trucks, spread out across a 2,000-mile border. Unfortunately, about 2/3 of it coming right to your state right now. In order to fight this, it's not just a matter of scanners at the border. You need cooperation from Mexico on everything you named: investigators, prosecutors, ports, intelligence, all capital letters. And you cut that off in 90 days and then maybe restart it. You have to restart everything all over again. It's incredibly disruptive.
I appreciate that. Now, I have, in my time in public life, both here in Congress and formerly as mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, have been a friend of Mexico, making the case that we need to have a stronger economic unit between United States, Mexico, Canada, and that's how we're going to win this economic battle with China. As a result, I've been a critic of the recent judicial reforms in Mexico, which I think is a step backwards in terms of promoting U.S. investment in Mexico. INL has helped to train Mexican institutions to build and present strong legal cases against organized crime. Mexico's forensic labs and prisons are accredited to reach higher standards for forensic testing due to INL support. U.S. officials helped to train police investigators in Mexico City, reducing violent crime in Mexico City by 58% in partnership with now President Sheinbaum. And INL support helped Mexico law schools update their curriculums to include Mexico's criminal law reform. These offices that train police and prosecutors and relied on INL funds are now cut drastically by the dismantling of foreign assistance. So another question from Mr. Isaacson. You hosted a podcast last October about Mexico's constitutional reforms, where you opened by saying, quote, "promise to be serious setbacks in the struggle to hold powerful people and institutions accountable for corruption." How do Mexico's constitutional changes, including reorganization of National Guard and judicial reforms, concern you? Maybe you could go on a little bit. For those who haven't listened to your podcast, go on a little bit more about the threat of the constitutional reforms.
Sure, and I hope you call in my colleague who runs our Mexico program, Stephanie Brewer, who really knows this stuff. But they just changed their judiciary so that judges are now popularly elected. Like, people are going to come and vote for a long list of judges. A justice system, especially when they're working on these very complicated, very dangerous cases against these networks of corruption and powerful people who are willing to kill them, need to be free of political pressures and need to be autonomous. And this just dealt a strong blow to that. As well, substituting police and detectives and people who are in the community with National Guard troops who rotate in and out, that also makes it harder to you can find crimes when they're happening, but you can't really get to the root of who is behind them.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Shreve of the state of Arizona.
Representative Shreve, Madam Chairwoman, is from the state of Indiana and is happy to be here.
Or state of Indiana, I'm sorry. Not even a downgrade, no. And Indiana is one of...
Madam Chair, we agree. I thank the witnesses for being here. And I have a question that, in fairness, I'll address to Ms. Kenney, because I wasn't in the room to hear the testimony from our other witnesses. But I appreciate all of you sharing time and expertise with us. Of course, INL defines its core mission as keeping America safe by countering crime, illegal drugs, and instability abroad. We recognize that America is vulnerable to external threats, certainly including narcotics. We recognize that on both sides of the aisle. In my view, the Trump administration is demonstrably making headway in securing our border and curbing some of the trafficking that was making its way up I-65 and across I-70 in Indiana, particularly on the fentanyl trafficking. We are seeing headway palpably within the district that I represent. The most pressing drug-related threats in my part of the country would stem from the trafficking efforts of the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel. These organizations, I am informed in part by some of the county sheriffs that I represent, dominate the wholesale supply of illicit opioids, particularly fentanyl and heroin, in and through my district. The crisis is personal to me. I have friends and constituents who have lost loved ones to fentanyl poisoning. And this must continue to be a bipartisan priority. And Mr. Stanton had to step out, but I do think that this is a bipartisan priority. Since 2008, INL has overseen some $3 billion in funding for security, counter-narcotics, and rule of law programs in Mexico. And Mr. Isaacson, you talked about the abrupt curtailing of some of that. There were a few GAO reports of late highlighting gaps in INL's metrics and monitoring, raising concerns about the effectiveness of these programs. Certainly, the administration is attuned to those. The GAO report concluded, without fully addressing the key elements for assessing progress, the U.S. government cannot be assured that it is achieving its security goals in Mexico and that its investments at over $3 billion since 2008 are being spent effectively. So I'll direct my question to the witness that I heard from in her testimony, though invite anyone else that may have expertise to respond. Ms. Kinney, what lessons should INL take away from the GAO evaluation of its programs in Mexico that can be used to inform our future initiatives, our future investment in this cause?
Thank you for this question. We reviewed the effectiveness, the results of the Merit Initiative and the Bicentennial Framework. We did our work sort of at a time period that straddled both of these strategies. And we looked to see what were the results of the $3 billion plus investment that the U.S. had made in Mexico. And what we found is that there were key elements of INL's performance management approach, if you will, that limited our ability to really evaluate its effectiveness. So in these strategies, both Merida and the framework, the Bicentennial Framework, we found that they had established those top-level goals and objectives, and that they had a number of individual projects and activities that address things like counter-narcotics flows, fentanyl flows, and they're tracking data on the implementation of all of these activities. They had not identified which of these activities were critical, which were the ones that were really critical to being able to assess the effectiveness of these top-line goals. They just hadn't identified the indicators and then monitored to align them to be able to say, this suite of activities is going to demonstrate our progress in achieving this goal. When we talked to the State Department about what were the challenges in being able to complete this, because this went back to the Merit Initiative, which started in 2008, they said that that the U.S. government was working with the Mexican government to come up with some shared set of indicators. These strategies are designed to be sort of shared approaches, both for the U.S. and Mexican government, to be able to address these shared issues, shared challenges, and that there were some challenges in being able to develop a common set of indicators. And some of the complicating factors were, at the time, new administrations both in Mexico and the United States. However, we would point out that given the level of investment and given the continuity of these challenges, it's really important that the State Department figure out what these indicators are, figure out what these suite of activities should be to be able to support those top-line goals and be able to measure and share the effectiveness of those efforts going forward. So that is really our recommendation. Our recommendation is really identified as a priority recommendation for the State Department. Of all of the recommendations that we make, we believe this is one of the most critical ones to be able to really make progress on the individual activities and efforts to be able to address this critical issue between U.S. and Mexico.
Ms. Kinney, I appreciate very much. And my time has expired. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Shreve of the state of Indiana. I appreciate your time with us. And now I'm going to recognize Representative Jackson of the state of Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Salazar. Thank you, Ranking Member. Colombia is the regional leader in coordinating the multinational operation Campaign Orion, a naval campaign focused on dismantling the transnational network of drug trafficking and related crimes. During the 13th edition of the Orion Naval Campaign last year, operations in which 125 institutions in 62 countries from Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe, and for the first time, Oceania participated. Participating forces seized more than 400 tons of drugs. Thanks to the exchange of intelligence and the culmination of capabilities to counter the illicit trafficking of drugs and other illegal activities linked to narco trafficking. I must say that was a very diverse network. It had a high level of intelligence being interchanged, and they had shared interests. They had equity amongst all participants. DEI does work. So I don't know where we get off on this tangent that makes no sense to me on diversity is bad. Diversity and equity is in quite a few constitutions around the world. We're going through a temporary period of some insanity to act as if e pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one in the Americas. I'd like to let it be for the record that 2/3 of our hemisphere and population is not in the United States, and we are one contiguous land mass. The operations reached record figures in narcotics seized, reducing the supply worldwide and dealing significant blows to the finances of multi-crime organizations, preventing them from receiving more than $18.7 billion, according to the Colombian military forces. Authorities seized a total of 402 tons of solid chemical precursors and 1.6 million liters of liquid chemical precursors and destroyed 302 illegal infrastructures used for the extraction and processing of drugs. The Colombian Navy reported the 112 boats seized and 211 vehicles and on and on. Since this program started about 7 years ago, with only narco trafficking, the Orion 12 have included other crimes that are present in the maritime land domain as well, such as arms and migrant smuggling, trafficking, money laundering, and the like. The 13th edition of the Orion Naval Campaigns have consolidated it as the most important and influential international cooperation strategy in the global fight against narco trafficking, and has also managed to transcend in time thanks to innovation and rapid adaptation to respond to this highly complex and changing phenomenon. Once again, I want to thank each of you for coming, and this question will go to you, Mr. Isaacson, and thank you for your outstanding service as well. What is the impact of aid cuts in this program, such as Orion Naval Campaigns?
Well, the main impact has been that the Colombian National Police, in its part of the effort to interdict cocaine, has had some real disruptions. Even many of their Black Hawk helicopters were grounded for a while because they didn't have money for maintenance or fuel. Trainings have been disrupted, and just the intelligence that you need in order to maintain this level of interdictions has been disrupted. I don't know for how long, because I just don't have the information for how long it's been cut off and whether decisions have been made to give waivers. And if so, is that going to mean a few blank months this year where the level of interdiction dips, which has been at record levels, or whether they're going to be able to recover that? But we'll find out soon.
So do you think that the money that might have been saved theoretically will come back to be a penny saved and a dollar foolish?
I think so, because it's not good government practice to stop all of your programs for 90 days and then just selectively restart them. Your partners just don't work like that, and it may cost them months and months, if not a couple of years, to really recover from that, even if they do get to keep the level of funding they had before.
Well, thanks so much. So you're saying the whiplash, the backlash, the frenetic, the hectic pace this capitulation, this erratic behavior is bad for our long-term goal of reducing the drug trafficking in our region?
It was definitely good for the organized crime groups who wanted to evade the police and the Navy and others in Colombia.
I yield back. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Jackson. And now I'm going to recognize Representative Titus of the state of Nevada for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member. Mr. Isaacson, would you go over this for me just again very simply? What was the justification given by President Trump for levying tariffs against Mexico?
The main justification was that Mexico wasn't cooperating enough in stopping fentanyl coming to the United States.
Right. And now that the president is threatening a trade war with Mexico, has that compelled greater cooperation from their authorities on this issue?
I guess if Mexico thinks they can stop the tariffs, then they will come up with some seizures and they'll bomb some labs and things like that. But it won't help with things like complex investigations and intelligence now.
So it really hasn't moved that
No,
ball.
and if the tariffs happen, then what incentive does Mexico have once their economy is cratering to keep cooperating?
And that's part of the problem. Will they happen? Will they not?
Right.
On what products? How much? What percent? That sort of thing.
Right.
Well, will cuts to the INL programs in Mexico help or hurt our ability to stem the flow of fentanyl into the country?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this before. You can't just have better scanners at the border and hope or bomb a few labs. It costs $60,000 to start a new fentanyl lab. You need a lot of the things that INL does, which is building intelligence, building port security programs, canine, courts, all this other stuff so that you can stop the whole network that's doing this rather than just try to stop it at a scanner on the border. And if you disrupt INL programs, you're disrupting that very, very, very important ingredient in the fight.
So it's working counter to what you claim is the purpose of the tariffs and other dealings with Mexico.
Threatening your partners, really taking away their incentive to cooperate while freezing and restarting and halting and putting waivers and confusing the programs that you are running is obviously not going to be helpful. It's going to be helpful maybe to the people producing fentanyl.
So in the meantime, in addition to the tariffs, can you talk about the effect of the Trump administration's prioritizing arbitrary mass deportations over things like root causes of terrorism, transnational crime, drug trafficking, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, the Trump administration is trying to do mass deportation with the existing people they have, right? Like 5,500 ICE enforcement removal officers, which means where are they going to get the manpower? They're taking it from DEA, they're taking it from DOJ, everything, Bureau of Prisons, ICE, HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. These are the agencies that are supposed to be working on these drug cases, as well as cases, everything from child pornography to human trafficking. They're all being devoted to rounding up migrants now, often even migrants without criminal records. And it's a really, really disastrous diversion of our law enforcement resources.
So could you sum that up by saying that it's made us less safe, not more safe?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it this way, if you are a fentanyl trafficker or a child pornographer or something like that, you are feeling less pressure from federal law enforcement since January 20th because of this diversion of resources.
Because they're focused somewhere else and you can get away perhaps.
Yeah, they're
with
focusing
things.
on migrants. And if you're not in the migrant smuggling business, you have less to worry about.
So if we're going to impose tariffs on Mexico, that's going to be a tax on families in my district.
Sure.
People in Nevada are going to pay more out of pocket. If you don't have money in your pocket, you can't go on holiday. People won't be coming to Las Vegas for a holiday. Mm-hmm. Certainly if you're from Canada or Mexico, you're not going to be as likely to come as a tourist, and that's our main source of tourism. And at the same time, what we're doing is undercutting our response to the flow of fentanyl. Does that pretty much summarize the problem?
Yeah,
the situation?
The arguments against tariffs are pretty strong economically here at home, but also, if you are a Mexican government official, even one who really believes in this fight, what's your incentive to cooperate if you're being punished without even any clear benchmarks or guidelines about how to stop the punishment? And the same goes for fentanyl as well as working against migrant smuggling through Mexico too. You're just, what's going to push you to work harder to do the Americans a favor and work harder in together on this if you already have a 25% tariff on all of your goods?
All right. Well, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Titus. And now we are going to start start a second round of questioning, not too long, and I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. We all agree that we want to revamp and make INL a better agency. We all agree with that. And I was just wanted to tell my respected ranking member that what the Trump administration is doing is trying to cut waste and on important programs like INL. And because INL funded hip-hop classes in Guatemala. I go back to things that they should not be doing. We all agree that we have to cooperate with Mexico and that we have to help the Guatemalan police force and El Salvador. And by the way, one of the things I also wanted to, and I want to talk to three of you, is I'm not going to just hone in on Mr. Isaacson. We decertified El Salvador, INL decertified El Salvador as a partner, which led to the cuts in funds. These are the things that I don't understand. Why? Because you think that Bukele may not be ideologically aligned with the State Department. Why are you going to do that? And the same thing with Guatemala. I'm just stating what I think it's common sense. Right now, in Latin America, projects that prove to be effective are back online. For instance, targeting systems in Mexico and Peru that provide intelligence on foreign passengers and cargo. Dogs in Costa Rica. All right, so my question to Mrs. Kenny, since you are an impartial force in this hearing, tell me in very simple terms, for those people who are at home that do not want to spend taxpayers' money in things that are futile, like hip-hop classes in Guatemala, in which way that $2 billion that we give INL every year, where do you think should be spent? Give it to me in 30 seconds, like a good television soundbite. So people back at home will say, okay, INL should be back on track. Tell me.
So based on our review of the INL programs,
Yes.
what we have found is that there are some consistent patterns in terms of implementation. GAO would not identify the policy choices that INL should make, but we are happy to talk to you about the effectiveness of the implementation. And what we have found consistently is that there are opportunities to improve performance management, ensuring that the activities that you are funding are meeting your strategic goals. We saw it in Mexico, we saw it in firearms trafficking, we saw it in efforts in the Caribbean, making sure that the specific activities that you're funding are linking up and actually helping you achieve your goal.
Why do you think that happens? So what you're telling me basically is that I am going to do this, but I'm not sure if it's being effective or not, but I'm going to put the money behind it anyway. Is that what you're telling me? So why do you think that happened, and how can that be changed? Why did it happen?
Well, I think our recommendation is that the State Department figure out how to create that alignment, that these activities should be funded to the overall strategic goals. I think in Mexico, what we found, what we heard, is that there was some effort to coordinate with the Mexican government, which is a good idea. However, we had been funding the Merit Initiative since 2008, and the administrations were going to change, so that was something that needed to be done. I think when we looked at firearms trafficking and we found similar programs or similar issues, we found that everyone would tell us that firearms trafficking in the Caribbean, in the Central America, in Mexico, that these were important U.S. goals. But when we asked about where the metrics were, how they were measuring effectiveness, it didn't show up. They didn't have firearms trafficking as one of their performance measures, so they weren't able to track it and demonstrate progress. It didn't show up in their strategies. So it's just important that whatever it is you decide your strategy, whatever your goal is, you need to be sure that your activities are aligned with it and that you're able to track and align those up to be sure that you're achieving the goals that you want to achieve.
So I'm sure the State Department is listening to you. Now, let me ask you, let's go to Mexico, and maybe we can talk to Mr. Fernandez or Mr. Isaacson. Mexico is a very important ally. It's our next door neighbor. We've got to work with them because no one is going to move, right? So we're going to stay where we are, and so are they. I remember that under AMLO, Mexico, President Trump had a very good relationship with President AMLO, who had a completely different ideology than President Trump, and that AMLO sent 37,000 troops to the southern borders with Guatemala. That worked very well. All of a sudden, they cooperated. So why did that stop? And what incentives we're giving now Shane Baum, who comes from that same Morena party, I hear that relationships are good between both governments. So what can they really do? And in which way we could help them do it? And do they have the political willingness to receive money from the United States? And we know that, it's like we are neighbors, but we are not necessarily love each other, but we got to live with each other. Correct? Am I right in my assessment? We start with you, Mr. Fernandez. What can we do?
Yeah, I think it's important to your question about whether they will receive that assistance. I think that goes to the core of the issue.
Will they receive the assistance?
They have rejected a significant amount of
What have they
assistance in the
rejected?
past. I think because there are issues with corruption, there's issues with nationalism as well, and I mean we tried, I think, very clearly under the Biden administration to not pressure and do a positive
respectful.
engagement, as was alluded to by my colleague here, but obviously didn't result in anything substantive as far as countering the fentanyl threat. It only expanded more greatly.
But explain it to me simply. What happened during those 4 years once, why so much fentanyl was able to come through? What did the Mexican government should have done that didn't do? And what can they do now under Sheinbaum?
I think
Simple.
What happened over the past 4 years is we stopped pressuring them. And
Stop pressuring them.
Yeah, and that's
What
something that
pressures we should have
economic
implemented?
pressure, I think, is certainly the most potent that we have in the bilateral relationship with trade and the USMCA.
Stop right there. You see, Mr. Isaacson, so then I agree that tariffs are bad for our constituents. I get it. But then what other tool do we have as a country to send the message to our neighbors that we need help because we don't want any more American kids dying?
Prosecutorial cooperation, intelligence cooperation. From 2023 to 2024, there was a 22% decrease in fentanyl seizures at the border. So far this year, it's down another 23%. Less seems to be being produced in Mexico, I think because of better cooperation. This may be premature, but no one's declaring victory, but there has actually been progress in the last 2 years.
But that's very little progress. We had 100,000 kids dying every year.
And deaths, thank goodness, are down about 30%.
And the concussion and the chemicals are put together in Mexico.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And we just passed legislation that the Congress voted for where we are giving money so we can destroy those precursors before they get composed into the little pill and our kids die. So I'm saying, what I'm trying to look is political. Do we have political willingness? Sheinbaum, does she have political willingness to really work with us? We want to work with her.
I think Sheinbaum does. I'd be worried about people at the state level in Mexico. I'd be worried about corrupt military and police people.
So they have her own. She has her own swamp.
Yeah, she does have a swamp that she has to clean up, as does their judicial system. And
Thank you.
INL can help.
All right. Thank you. Yield back. Now I recognize Ranking Member Castro from the wonderful state of Texas for 5 minutes.
There you go.
Got it.
All right. All right. With respect to effective and serious and thoughtful cutting of waste, fraud, and abuse in government, I don't think it's going to be carried out by this DOJ committee that is being led by folks who have absolutely no expertise in this area, by 22-year-olds and 20-year-olds with the nickname of Big Balls. They're not going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here. They have no background in any of this, hardly any life experience, quite honestly. And more than that, they're keeping all of their work secretive. In fact, Elon Musk, as I recall, threatened the press that he would file suit or said that it was illegal if they just identified who these people were that are making these massive decisions about how our government operates. And that's not fair to the American people. It's not fair to American taxpayers to have a secret group in charge of what's going on in government that won't show its face at the United States Capitol. And even more than that, a majority party in Congress that isn't even asking them to show up, isn't even demanding that they show up and account for the work that they're doing. That's where we are right now. I hope that everybody in the full committee of this dais, when we have our full committee meetings, will join me and others in asking Elon Musk and those responsible for cuts to INL, cuts at the State Department, USAID, to come here and present to us their work. I mean, we can't even get a clear answer of what percent of INL, for example, is being cut. And that applies to other agencies and bureaus as well. So why doesn't this full committee ask Elon Musk to come and sit in these chairs, as our three witnesses have today, and explain the cuts that have been made and why they've been made? The one person that we had come, as I recall, Pete Morocco, whose job title is now changed, he came and I don't know who insisted, I don't know if the committee insisted or he and his people insisted that it not be a public hearing, that it be a closed door, private briefing, and instead of having 5 minutes to ask questions, we had like 2 or 3 minutes to ask questions. Just bizarre. This is the United States government, and we're running our country right now. The country's being run like these countries that we've been critiquing for decades and decades by people who are doing secretive things, not transparent. And so, look, I agree that that's why you have a GAO. That's why you have inspectors general. And could we do more than that? Yeah, I think that we could do more than that. I think we should do more than that. And we do need to make adjustments because things do get stale and, and need to change. And Maria, you and I was your Democratic co-lead on that fentanyl bill on precursors. I thought that was a good piece of legislation. But remember, I've been presented now, I think at least twice, where we've been told in this committee and then in my other committee, in unclassified information, that 70 to 90% of the precursors or the source material for fentanyl comes to the United States first, and then goes over to Mexico, and then ends up coming back. So these are serious problems, but they demand serious approaches, and they demand people with expertise who actually know what they're doing. Really nothing against people in their early 20s. I wish I was still in my early 20s. But the people that have been put in charge of overseeing this have absolutely no background or no expertise to do it. With that, I yield back, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing pursuant to committee rules. All members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and other materials for the record, subject to the length limitations. Without objections, this committee stands adjourned, and once again, thank you for your participation.
And there you have it, a congressional hearing on the INL, and all you see that the difficulties with the fentanyl pouring over the border and really what seems to be a growing voice of consensus that the last administration did not secure this border. The proof is in the pudding. If you just look simply at the numbers and the fentanyl poisonings that took place specifically with the increase in very violent crime, from rape and murder to torture in some cases. Very, very terrible things that have happened. And we saw that video, of course, with, Secretary of DHS Kristi Noem in El Salvador, thanking the president of El Salvador for taking many of those criminal illegal aliens and detaining them, and just saying, this is what happens when you cross into the country illegally and perpetuate violent crime. Thank you to our sponsors here at Colonial Metals Group, a wonderful group when you're looking towards your retirement especially. Scan that QR code now, shield your savings, because when it comes to those big moments in life, you need that financial backup. And gold and silver only increasing so much since 1971 and even the year 2000, 840% increase, in fact. And then you go back to 71, of course, over 7,000%. So freegoldguide.com/RSBN, freegoldguide.com/RSBN. Get yours today. Do not delay, and it will be a great way to really have that bet and that hedge against inflation. So Colonial Metals Group, thank you to Paul Stone, the great CEO, and this wonderful company focused on your financial future. Thank you to Lean as well. Are you a yo-yo dieter? Maybe your diet is going well, then you backtrack. All of those things happen, but it's dangerous. Studies show that it can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, and type 2 diabetes exponentially. So breaking this pattern of the yo-yo diet, so important, and it's really a supplement. It's not an injection or anything unhealthy for you, just something to add to your diet already occurring. So take lean.com, trim fat like Doge trims waist. The science behind lean is impressive. It's studied natural ingredients target weight loss and actually turn fat into energy. They maintain blood sugar and also control appetite and craving. So this deal that I have for you today, I'd like to get you started with 20% off. RSBN, that is the code, and that's lean.com, code RSBN. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. MyPillow.com/RSBN. The spring sheet sale is here. Say that 10 times fast. Spring sheet sale. Oh yes, the Giza Dream Sheets from the Mediterranean, all made and produced here in America, in Minnesota, in fact, those great facilities of Mike Lindell's. Save 50% off the Queen Sheets, $29.98. What a good deal that is. But there's 2,000 different items at mypillow.com/RSBN for up to 50% off. It's great patriot Mike Lindell, someone who is familiar with being canceled, but when you go woke, you go broke, and you, the American people, defended a great patriot, Mike Lindell, a defender of the First Amendment, wants someone there as well to ensure the election integrity. He's spoken loudly about that. We know President Trump signing that EO this week. So check out mypillow.com/RSBN for a great day. You need a good night's rest, and it starts with MyPillow. That's for sure. Thank you for sponsoring us, Mr. Mike Lindell, mypillow.com/RSBN. And thank you for joining us this morning now into afternoon. It's about 12:45 on the East Coast, the beautiful White House, a lovely sunny day as it is here in the friendliest village on the plains, Auburn, Alabama. Just a programming note, I'll be joined by Mr. Matthew Alvarez in a few minutes for the next stream that we'll be having, and that will be a live content show talking about all the news this week, what's happening today inside and outside of the Beltway. So for all my colleagues here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, stick with us today as we go into an afternoon full of content and coverage, and then into an evening show featuring none other than the 47th President of the United States, once former, again back in the office, of course, President Donald John Trump. I'm Robert McNeely. For my colleagues here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, God bless you. Stay awake, not woke, and join us here on the right side of history. That's Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. We'll see you on the next stream. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from the Diamond and Silk Chit Chat live show. Look, don't forget to check me out right here on RSBN Network. Be sure to watch the show on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. Yes, it's imperative that you do so, okay? I look to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.
I hear every day about the products you all wish My Pillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard My Pillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use My Pillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all My Pillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard My Pillows absolutely free.